Hey everybody, so today I'm going to be reviewing the final season of Better Call Saul. The season wrapped up a couple of days ago with the final episode, and I think also in this review I'm going to kind of give an overall review of Better Call Saul as a whole, how it stands up to Breaking Bad, how it fits into the Breaking Bad universe, all the little callbacks and neat little tricks that this show was able to pull off as a prequel. First off, straight off the back, I actually think this is one of the best prequels ever made, when you really think about it. It might even be the best. I mean, you have like the Star Wars prequels, what else? Surely there's like other prequels out there, but it's just not coming to mind. But like, of course, the Star Wars prequels, they were good, but they were also very, very flawed. A lot of people had a lot of bad things to say about those movies. Though Better Call Saul is really, look, it's not Breaking Bad. It's not trying to be Breaking Bad, but for what it is really damn good. That's for sure. It is a really good show. I really, thinking back most of it, I can't really think of like any mistakes they made with the continuity, with the overall story. I'm not sure. It hasn't really been enough time to say that it's flawless. I'm pretty sure there are flaws with it. Some things that they probably didn't get quite right, but I can't really think of that many or any off the bat. And of course, this season is going to be compared to the final season of Breaking Bad, which is widely regarded as the greatest TV finale of all time, or arguably so. And like, I have seen the final season of Breaking Bad a few times now, and I never like to say the word impossible, but I feel like that finale, for what it was in like the drama genre, was virtually impossible to top. It did pretty much everything perfectly. I have never been so gripped by a television's final season, and it is just like a roller coaster ride, just throwing something new at you at every turn. The tension is being dialed up to like 11. Everything goes down. Every single character has its time to shine. But the thing is that you can't really top that in that regard. So you kind of have to like do something else entirely. And like, I'm not for saying like never say never. I'm not saying that it is literally impossible to make a better finale. Like, you never know what's around the corner, what could come next, but to me it would be extremely difficult to top that. But in Better Call Saul, even though it didn't have me at the edge of my seat, like gripping, like totally gripped, wanting to know what happened next, it still did make me feel quite a few things, and I do really have to appreciate the final season of Better Call Saul to do that. Like, people are going to say, well, can Vince Gilligan strike again with this series? And I think he definitely did. In ways that in new ways that he didn't do in Breaking Bad, because he's more experienced now. And overall, I just think it is a really incredible final season for its own right. So I'm going to be rattling off the main highlights of the season for me. I'm not going to go through every episode. I'm just going to kind of go off by memory about major plot details that really that really stuck with me in this season. So without further ado, here I go. So season 6, much like the final season of Breaking Bad, it was split into two halves, though the wait was far shorter than what Breaking Bad fans had to wait for in 2012 and 2013. I only watched Breaking Bad pretty recently, so I wasn't bothered by all that stuff. But it starts off just the way season 5 ends, where Lalo's house is being invaded, and they attempt to murder Lalo, which is not successful. They think it's successful at first, but this season picks right off the bat that Lalo is still alive and he's still out there and he's still out for blood and looking for Saul Goodman. So these first few episodes, it is pretty classic Better Call Saul stuff, but the main theme is that Lalo is on the run, and Kim Wexler and Saul Goodman, Jimmy McGill, start to get a bit suspicious when things aren't quite right. Kim Wexler realizes that Mike has been watching them yet again, and it's revealed that Lalo is not dead yet. So there are a few things that I remember from these episodes, but what I remember most from this season was definitely its second half, which starts with the episode Point and Shoot. Now, in the previous episode, just before Point and Shoot, the name of the episode escapes my memory for some reason. Howard is murdered by Lalo in front of Kim and Saul, and Kim and Saul are suddenly put in a state of intense shock. They have no idea why this is happening, why Lalo is still alive. They start a point and shoot. Lalo commands to run and he commands Saul to run an evil errand to take a gun and murder someone in his behalf. But Saul is able to persuade Lalo that Kim would be the better option, just because it's not really for selfish reasons, but it feels like if he did it, somehow Kim would be put in even more jeopardy. Anyway, Kim goes and tries to murder this person, but is stopped by Mike. And Mike calms her down and tries to get her to walk through exactly what happened so he can help her and Saul get out of this whole terrible situation. So the episode progresses until where Lalo is seen trying to track down Gustavo Fring, finds him in his laundry, in his laundromat, and kills all of his henchmen, and commands Gus to show Lalo his meth lab, which is still under construction at this stage in the timeline. So he forces Gus to open up the big laundry drawer and take him inside this big space that is underground, which is definitely supposed to be... It is the super lab from Breaking Bad under construction. Though Gus is able to persuade Lalo to keep on talking and is able to shut the lights off and shoot him blindly in the dark, which he succeeds. So the end of this episode, it is Lalo and Howard being buried in a hole underneath the super lab, which I thought was absolutely brilliant, because now you can watch Breaking Bad again and you cannot see the super lab the same way again. You will now know that there are two corpses underneath the floor, which I thought was a really, really smart move. And it's just completely just restructures like the continuity of like both shows, and I mean this is made after Breaking Bad, but it's set before Breaking Bad, and I just thought it was just really masterful how they were able to make all these new connections. I do think Point and Shoot might actually be my favourite episode of the entire season, tying with the very last episode, which I will get into. So the next episode, Fun and Games, is basically the aftermath of Point and Shoot, and Kim and Jimmy trying their hardest to keep quiet about everything that happened in that previous episode. They meet the widow of Howard, and they try to kind of lie in the best way possible to try and tell their side of the story of what happened, though they lie quite badly in this scene, and they are very guilty about doing that, but they have really no choice. And anyway, Kim quits being an attorney, and Saul comes home pretty angrily and shocked, and she reveals to Saul that they're in a toxic relationship, that them on their own aren't really bad people, but together they are just really bad for one another, and they need to separate before things get any worse for them. So now Saul and Kim have been divorced, and it progresses to Saul now moving in and really getting comfortable with his new office, which is the same office that is seen in Breaking Bad. Now, at this point of the season, this is where the season takes a bit of a turn thematically and kind of like in like the timeline. Most of what you see in the rest of this season is in black and white, which is supposed to communicate to the audience that this is now set after the events of Breaking Bad, after all the stuff that happened in Breaking Bad has been finished. So it flashes forward to now. Jimmy McGill is now under the alias of Gale and is now residing in, I think it's New Arizona or something. But anyway, he is now working in a mall at Cinnabon, and he is basically doing his absolute hardest to put his past behind him. So in this episode, Nippy, Saul really proves himself to be quite the con man, and he's able to con himself into a situation with an old lady called Marion, and through this this relationship or whatever it's called that Saul now has with Marion, he's able to pick up a new kind of like a new player, which is Marion's son Jeff, and teaches him how to rob houses, teaches him how to rob a massive department store without getting caught. And Saul really isn't doing this anymore for the money. He's basically just doing this because he has nothing left. This is all he's good at. And this is basically what gives him a thrill now. He just does it for like the thrill of like success. And you can really see that this is really when he is really starting to become like a real criminal. Even after what happened in Breaking Bad, and he's starting to become like really shady. He's able to like become friends with like the shopping malls, center management people, and able to strike up a really feisty conversation with them just to keep them distracted away from the TV screens while Jeff is in the background robbing this store, which is this really like elaborate scheme that they both set up. And it's really exciting to watch. It's a really exciting sequence, and there's this part where he slips over for like 2 minutes, and Saul is still able to completely hold the security guard's attention for like 2 whole minutes. So that's how good he is at talking to people at this point. So then the next episode is simply called Breaking Bad, and I know it's to be a very spoiler-heavy review, but Aaron Paul and Bryan Cranston do make a reappearance in this episode, even though it is pretty brief. It's basically supposed to be set just after the scene in the episode of Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul, where Saul makes his very first appearance, where he Jesse and Walter White smuggle Saul away into the desert and have a bit of a confrontation with him. But basically, they're not out for blood. They're just trying to like intimidate him into becoming their lawyer. And the scene in this episode, the Better Call Saul episode, the recent episode, was just after that, and Saul's basically just like exploring their RV, seeing how experienced Walt is at this point. And when I first saw this episode, it did confuse me, but after rewatching, I actually rewatched the Breaking Bad Better Call Saul episode today, and I completely forgot about that scene, and it reminded me of what happened and why Saul was having flashbacks about that grave that was dug in the ground, and it was directly related to that scene from Breaking Bad. And Bryan Cranston, as always, was excellent in this scene. Aaron Paul was as well. I think my only complaint about Aaron Paul was that he didn't quite sound like Jesse Pinkman, but that's fine. I mean, it's been a long time since Aaron Paul has been in that character, and I thought he still did a really good job in this scene. And then there's the second last episode of Better Call Saul, which is called Waterworks. Now, I kind of thought Waterworks was kind of like the Ozymandias of Better Call Saul. This is kind of like the episode where everything just comes out. Like, this is just when the truth comes out, and everything just falls apart, and everybody is kind of like finally sees the truth about what's going on. So in this episode, Kim Wexler finally spills the beans about what happened to Howard. She's sick and tired of lying. She goes to, I think she goes to like a police station, and she just like confesses of just what happened to Howard. That it still wasn't Jimmy and Kim's fault of what happened, but their involvement in the whole situation. She still feels responsible for the death of Howard. And what else happens? Oh yeah, there's also another like Breaking Bad timeline scene with Jesse Pinkman, which is also supposed to take place like a night before the events of the Breaking Bad Better Call Saul episode takes place, where Jesse is checking out Saul's office, about to tell Walter White that this should be the lawyer for them, and he meets Kim, and he basically just asks Kim, is this lawyer for real? Is this the real deal? Is this what we should be looking for? And she simply replies to him, he was when I knew him. So she's kind of explaining that she doesn't really know what Saul is really up to anymore, what he's like, whether he's changed, but he doesn't know him as a person anymore. So, and she kind of has lost trust in him, basically. And so one final note of this episode is once the truth of what happened to Howard is out, and Kim has told the police, Marion finally figures out the truth about Gail. She sees Saul Goodman's ad on YouTube, and she basically points the finger at Saul, saying, you're not who I think you are. You're a criminal. You're Saul Goodman. She is 100% right, and calls the cops on Saul. So now Saul is on the run. And so it leads to the final episode, the series finale of Better Call Saul, which is simply called Saul Gone, which I thought was actually a pretty cool pun. It's pretty funny. Though the episode is probably, it's not funny, it's actually very dramatic. It does have funny moments in it, but this is kind of like the downfall of Saul Goodman in one episode. So Saul is on the run, but not for long. He's only on the run for like 5 minutes, and he gets caught by the police, and basically the rest of the episode is just Saul being put on trial, Saul being told of just how serious of what he's done, all of his charges, and we also get a special appearance by Betsy Brandt, which is Hank's widow, Mary from Breaking Bad. I actually did really like Betsy in this scene. She was a real bitch as a character in this scene. I mean, if you really see what she was being put through, I mean, you can really understand why she's feeling this way. You can just see that she absolutely hates Saul, but she really knows nothing about what he did, or really knows the facts of what exactly went down between him and Walter White in Breaking Bad. But she's like really vitriolic towards Saul, basically saying that no matter how long he's been locked up for, it won't be enough. But like the thing is that Saul isn't really directly responsible for all the things that Jesse Pinkman and Walter White did in Breaking Bad. It was all Walt's fault, basically, and Jesse's fault. But Saul was definitely a massive counterpart in why Hank was shot, why all those people were murdered. So he's being held accountable in this episode for what he's done. But I still did really like Betsy in this scene. It was really nice to see her again. And of course that's her character, but she was really mean in that scene. Now I'm doing this review right now knowing none of the reviews or the critical reception of what season 6 has gotten so far. But I can tell that this is going to be a very controversial final episode with the way things go down, kind of maybe like the same way the way of the season finale of The Sopranos was taken. It probably maybe not that bad. But of course, the season finale of The Sopranos over the years has gained much better reception of really seeing just why it ended in that way. But anyway, I'm not talking about Sopranos, I'm talking about Better Call Saul. So Saul, being such the talker that he is actually able to negotiate with his his charges, his whatever they're called, the people who lay charges on Saul, to only give him a 7.5-year sentence. And of course, Maria's shocked by this. She thinks it's a complete miscarriage of justice. It's definitely not long enough for somebody who is kind of like accountable for like the deaths of like 11, 12 people. And this is when things get pretty hairy, because you think that Saul is able to get would just be able to keep his mouth shut and just accept the 7-year sentence. But of course, Saul being Saul, he gets up and talks again to the judge. And he lies, well actually, I thought it was a lie at first, that the way he was introduced to Walter White with a gun to his head. Of course, when I watched that episode, I didn't remember that scene from Breaking Bad. I thought Walt just walked into Saul's office and they just started, you know, doing work together, but I actually realised that what he said about being pulled out into the desert and having the gun to his head, that was true. That actually happened in Breaking Bad. Though in the first time he says this, he says that he was scared of Walter White. He thought he was mad. He was crazy, and he only did what Walt told him to do because of the money, basically, and he was scared of him. Felt like he had no other choice. But the second time he says this, he says he actually did like working with Walt, and he loved the thrill of working with Walt, and he does not regret working with Walt, saying that he liked it, basically. And because of this, I think Saul kind of shows a bit of a colder side to his personality, a little bit of a more evil side, more shady side. And because of this, his 7-year sentence is reviewed yet again. And at the final scene of the show, Saul is now in prison, and Kim meets with him and shares a cigarette with him, and it's revealed that he has now got 86 years in prison, which is that's a really heavy sentence. That it really is. But Saul says, but you know, with good behaviour, who knows? So he's still hopeful that he's going to get parole, but he's probably not going to get parole, which is pretty sad. Okay, so there was one more scene in Saul Gone that I really, really did like, and I'm pretty sure you're going to guess what that is, and that's definitely the final exchange between Walter White and Saul Goodman in which is definitely in the Breaking Bad episode, Granite State. So this is when they are just sitting in like the vacuum shop, waiting for their identities to be changed, and Saul speaks to Walter White one more time, and he brings up like what Walt would do if he had a time machine, and of course Walt says that time travel is impossible, like just because of the scientist he is. But they start like discussing regrets, and Walter White brings up that he regrets not staying with grey matter technologies, because he knew he would have been loaded rich if he stayed with them without resorting to becoming a criminal, of course. And Saul says that the only thing that he regrets in his life was something really anecdotal and something that doesn't really matter at all. And Walt kind of just looks at them in this way, like saying, like, you don't have any major regrets, and nothing in your life changed you from becoming Jimmy McGill to Saul Goodman, that you were always this way. And Walt is just baffled at why Saul would say something like that, because Walt knows that Saul does have a history just like him. And of course, this is not the first scene where Jimmy brings up the concept of like asking people what you would do when he had a time machine. He also asks Mike this question as well when they're out in the desert hauling those bags full of money. And Mike opens up. He first opens up at it's like a date in late 2001, and I think this is because I think I do know that this character Mike, like I think like one of his children died or were like killed But he goes back to 1984 where he accepted his first bribe, which kind of like ties back into the whole Bad Choice Road thing. Like, that one event put me on this route of being who I am today, and I regret being put on that route. That's kind of what's implied, that I'm pretty sure Mike probably isn't proud of kind of like the person that picks up the pieces of like criminals. He's kind of like the underdog of the show, just like that guy who just wants to help people out, even if they're good people or bad people. You can kind of see that. But overall, the final scene with Saul and Bryan Cranston is fantastic, and I love how Bryan was almost exactly like he was as Walt back in Breaking Bad. I mean, he looked almost exactly the same. I mean, like, it looked like a scene from the final season of Breaking Bad. That's what it really looked like, and I thought it was just basically perfectly done. It was just a really good scene, and I honestly loved it. But again, it's up to the viewer of what we think will happen to Saul, what his fate is. But yes, there's one final exchange with Kim and Saul in the courtyard where Saul just does this, bang bang. I don't really understand the meaning of that, but it's almost like he said, his way of saying that, like, yeah, he's in prison now, but what a hell of a ride it was. So that's Better Call Saul Season 6. So what do I think of Season 6 Better Call Saul in general? I think it is a very, very well constructed finale to the Better Call Saul show. I really do not see it being ending any other way. Of course, I don't think it still lives up to the Breaking Bad finale in terms of tension and emotional shock that was through so much of that Breaking Bad finale. But there was definitely tension in this as well, in its own way. And as Better Call Saul as a whole, I do think it is a near-perfect prequel series. I really see it living up as being one of the best prequels of all time. Definitely in TV. I can't really think of that many other TV prequels, to be honest. But this one definitely stands as one of the best. I don't think it's completely perfect, though. I do think there are a few flaws here and there. But overall, it is very well crafted. It's very well thought out. And I'm really surprised of how quickly Better Call Saul started after Breaking Bad ended, only 1 year, and how Vince and Peter Gore were able to think up such a well thought out, very depth and a prequel story that makes sense, almost makes sense. I'm not sure if it perfectly makes sense, but it really, really is able to stand on as its own, as a TV show, as well as being an absolutely worthy prequel to Breaking Bad, and also being able to make some new connections to Breaking Bad, which will make you see Breaking Bad in a different way because of it. So overall, I'm going to give the whole series a 9 out of 10. It is, I would call it another masterpiece from Vince Gilligan. It is really, really good. And even though it is different from Breaking Bad, it is still very similar in a lot of ways, and I really have to appreciate Vince and his crew for being able to pull this off so well without really that many problems, because it is really a good series that is worth your time. I will probably talk about this series again, maybe in the future, now when I become a bit more well-versed with it, but as of now, just a few days after it ended, that's my opinion of Better Call Saul. It's definitely worth your time if you're curious about watching it. One last thing, if you haven't watched neither of the shows, you're probably going to think about, like, what's probably the best show to watch first. And I was really thinking about this for a while, but I actually kind of think that what you should do is watch the first 5 seasons of Better Call Saul first, then watch all of Breaking Bad, and then watch the final season of Better Call Saul. Now, for me personally, I watched Breaking Bad, the first 3 seasons first in 2017, and then I watched Better Call Saul up into season 5, and then I watched the rest of Breaking Bad in 2020, and then I finished Better Call Saul very recently. So of course, the way I've seen it, it's probably gonna feel different to maybe the way a lot of other people see this show, because of just the chronology of how it came out, kind of like how people see Star Wars different ways of the way that came out, or like different video games like Zelda and stuff like that. But overall, it makes almost perfect sense chronologically, and it's definitely a series that you should definitely check out. Alright, thank you for listening to my rambling Better Call Saul, and as always, take care.